Hi everybody, I'm Mark Ponsak, and I'm the VP of Product Strategy at GitLab. Now, earlier today, you heard some great news about GitLab and learned how some of our amazing customers are using us. Now I'd like to take you on a walk down memory lane and talk about where we came from, then show where we're currently at, and then talk a bit about where we're going. When GitLab first started out, it was just Git version control with a little bit of issue tracking thrown in. But developers needed more than just source code management, and so we soon added GitLab CI to test and build your source code. And it turns out developers love source code management and CI together. And that's great because we love developers. Can I get a quick show of hands? How many of you identify as developers? That's great. And we're really glad you're here. Now, put your hand up or keep it up if you use GitLab for development. Great, now keep your hands up if you've been using GitLab for more than 2 years. More than 3 years? Oh, anybody for 4 years? How about 5 years? Wow, that is awesome. Thank you. So if there's one thing I want you to remember from this presentation, is that GitLab is for developers. But developers don't just stop when their code is built. You need to get your code into production. And once it's in production, you need to monitor it to make sure it keeps running the way you want it to. And so GitLab evolved and started adding ops features. And pretty soon we were covering the entire DevOps lifecycle. So if you only remember one thing from this presentation, is that GitLab is for DevOps. But the thing about most DevOps toolchains is that they're just not solving enough. I mean, back in 2017, 3.8 billion was spent on DevOps software. But more than half of the time spent doing DevOps is wasted on logistics and repeatable tasks. And while it's all better than it was, almost 90% of the organizations that adopted DevOps were disappointed with the results. And the main reason is this right here. How many tools did you have to string together to form your DevOps toolchain? When you think about everything needed from planning a project through creating the code, testing it, packaging it up, deploying it, configuring the infrastructure, monitoring it in production, securing it, and many folks I talk to say they have even more logos in their stack. Chaining these tools together comes at a real cost of integration complexity. This is the toolchain crisis. You need people dedicated to build, design, and maintain these integrations. And they're brittle and can fail. But worst of all, the toolchain reinforces silos, since different people use different tools. And breaking down the silos was the whole point of DevOps in the first place. Can't we have just one platform that takes care of all of this? So at GitLab, we set out to create a complete DevOps platform, but delivered as a single application. Break the toolchain crisis and provide a single tool that everyone can use and collaborate together. And you've just heard how this has helped Delta and Goldman reduce their cycle times. So if you only remember one thing about this presentation, it's that GitLab is a complete DevOps platform delivered as a single application. So that's pretty cool, right? It may even sound too good to be true. Maybe it's better to see it in action. So let's get Dan Gordon on stage to give us a little demo of the GitLab DevOps platform. Thanks so much, Dan. That was fantastic. As you can see from Dan's demo, DevOps is not just about dev and ops. Security is actually baked in as it plays a critical role in business these days and can no longer be an afterthought. Being able to run security tests on your code from the first commit is pretty amazing and completely shortens that cycle. So of course, we cover development, security, and operations capabilities, but what about the people? We're going further and covering developers, security professionals, and operations professionals as first-class citizens, letting each person have a unique experience tailored to their needs. Now, quick show of hands. How many of you identify as operations? Oh. And how many identify as security? Okay, maybe next year, because we want GitLab to be the main interface for all of these people. Show up at work, start your day, and load up GitLab. And that's already happening. In GitLab 11.4, we shipped an ops dashboard. This provides an operation-specific view across multiple projects so that ops personnel get the information that's most important for them. And now it's available as a default homepage. Log in and immediately see exactly what you need. And then from the dashboard, you can quickly launch into other parts of GitLab to collaborate with everyone across the org. Imagine an ops person finds an issue in production, drills down to the application, and sees that a recent deploy caused the problem. Now, simultaneously, a dev gets alerted that their recent deploy triggered a change in production, goes to the merge request, and sees the performance change right there. When dev and ops talk, they're looking at the same data, but from their own point of view. For the same reason, we also released a security dashboard. Security teams need to manage and mitigate business risk. The security dashboard surfaces and highlights the overall status of application security. And it too can now be your default group page. So when dev, sec, and ops talk, they're looking at the same data, but from their own point of view. So if you only remember one thing from this presentation, it's that GitLab is for dev and sec and ops. Sid said earlier today, we have a lot of work to do. This is our category maturity table, and it's a public page you can get to right off our homepage. Each of the 10 stages have a bunch of product categories, and for each category, there's an icon showing how mature they are. Some categories are really mature and even lovable, but not everything is. Some of these don't even exist yet. We haven't started, but we will, and we're going to get all of these to be lovable. Now, if you're like most people, you might be a bit skeptical. You might not think we can pull this off. But looking back, we've got a pretty great track record going, and our pace is increasing dramatically. Of course, GitLab, the company, is growing very quickly, but it's not just us shipping all this great stuff. You see, GitLab is open core, and people are contributing, and I'm really excited to see this getting even stronger. Some organizations are even paying people to work full-time to contribute to GitLab. You're co-creating GitLab with us, all you heroes out there. Together, we're working to make DevOps a reality for teams and open source projects and in enterprises. Getting back to the chart, there's way too much future work to talk about here. So I want to pick one of my favorite upcoming features, auto remediation of security vulnerabilities. Auto remediation is such a great example because, well, it's a really cool feature, but it also really highlights dev and sec and ops working together. So what is auto remediation? Well, projects usually depend on other projects or modules. And when one of those dependencies has a vulnerability, there's usually a patch to fix it. And so one of the common security tasks is watching for these updates. And when that patch is released, you then need to update your software to use it. And then test your software again to make sure everything still works. That's a pain. Many teams, unfortunately, don't bother keeping these up to date or only update patches once a year or something, which means their software is actually vulnerable for a good chunk of time. Some teams do stay on top of it, but it's a lot of work, meaning they get the most junior developers to do it. But instead of making anyone do all that repetitive work, we want to automate it all away. Here in this mockup, a bot detects that a dependency has a new version. Now, it would already be pretty nice if we alerted your team to update your software when this happens. But is that really the best we can do? Instead of alerting someone, how about automatically creating a merge request for you that bumps that version number? And then run the test suite to make sure that everything still works. Now, there are some tools out there that do this, but many stop here. If we know the CI pipeline passes, how about automatically merging the changes? I mean, you trust your CI pipeline, right? So if all goes well, your security and development teams don't get alerts telling them what work they have to do. They just get an email telling them that all the projects have been automatically fixed. Now, what if everything doesn't go well? Of course, if the CI tests outright fail, well, then you should get an email about that. But we all know automatic tests aren't perfect. And sometimes tasks do pass, and yet problems still show up in production. But like a good DevOps organization, you've got monitoring and alerting set up on production. And even better, you're doing progressive delivery, so your pipeline starts rolling out to a small portion of the fleet first, like a canary that detects problems while the impact is still limited. So great, we could alert you about this failure, and you could go in and fix it. But can't we go further still? Here, the bot detects this and automatically rolls back production and reverts the merge quest, so we leave master in a good state. This we can finally alert the teams about. So instead of having to manually test 20 projects, you can focus on the few that can't be automated. So that ties together dev and sec and ops. A single platform that lets everyone collaborate and work better together, breaking down silos. But do we stop at dev, sec, and ops? A ton of people are involved in the development and delivery of software. That is the ultimate GitLab vision, where everyone involved with the software development and delivery uses a single application, so we're on the same page with the rest of the team. We've recently launched the first features for designers, and soon we'll have more for product managers. We'll be expanding to the business side with executive visibility and reporting. Heck, maybe even legal gets involved in license review. So while we're still calling it DevOps, we're really expanding the definition of DevOps and delivering it all as a single application. So if you only remember one thing from this presentation, it's that GitLab is for everyone. And with that, I thank you for your time and attention. Go get some lunch.